I've got a total game changer for you today in terms of learning. We all learn. We all want to learn something. We think of the matrix where you can just like upload instant knowledge, and if only we had that, how awesome would that be? But that's not the reality. We've learned that learning is a long slog from trying to absorb as much information and then maybe trying to apply it in different contexts with varying results. But it's a slog. It takes patience and fortitude. But that doesn't mean we cannot accelerate that process. We'll never maybe get to the matrix, who knows? But today we are actually poised to level up, to significantly boost our ability to learn because of ChatGPT. Now, many of you have already heard this, that you can ask ChatGPT questions and do all these wonderful, cool things. But just because you're using ChatGPT to help you learn doesn't mean you are maximizing its potential and your potential. So I want to show you today a specific technique that I call the knowledge feedback loop. What you're doing is you're establishing and starting a dialogue with ChatGPT, but you're doing it in a way where you're giving ChatGPT your current knowledge state. Think of your knowledge on a specific subject, whatever that is, represents a state in your mind. The connections between concepts, between ideas and definitions, they're all part of this knowledge state. And what you're trying to do is to get ChatGPT to figure out what are the inaccuracies or oversimplifications or omissions in your knowledge state so that you can make sure to, based on this feedback loop, update your knowledge state so that it's actually right and you're not going forward with misconceived notions. So how does this actually play out in real time? Well, let's take a dive. So here we have the ChatGPT screen, and today I'm going to choose the topic of machine learning. It's something that broadly has inspired the very creation of ChatGPT, but that's not why I'm using it. I'm actually enrolled in an intensive data science camp where we're learning about this. And it's complex information. There's a lot of nuance there, and it's easy to misconceptualize something. So this is a perfect opportunity for the knowledge feedback loop. So what do I do? Well, I've started reading about supervised versus unsupervised learning. Do I really understand the difference? Well, maybe. What do I do? Do I say, well, what is the difference, ChatGPT? Why don't you tell me? Between supervised and unsupervised learning. I think a lot of us would do this. It makes sense, right? Well, I've read all these documents, I've watched a few lectures, and now it's time to have ChatGPT kind of just break it all down for me. And we press enter. But don't do that. That is not a knowledge feedback loop because you haven't taken the knowledge state that you currently have on the topic and put it out there for ChatGPT to dissect, to analyze, to give you that feedback on. So it's actually going to take a lot more effort on your part than just asking it. You're actually going to have to do something akin to this. So I will break this down. Bear with me for a moment. I'm highlighting that part. This is the specific instructions that you want to give ChatGPT when you're doing something like this. This will set the context so it knows what you're doing. Once you've done that, though, it's your turn to cough up your knowledge state, or in this case, my knowledge state on supervised learning and unsupervised learning and the differences. Now, I've written quite a bit here. You might not have to write quite that much when you're learning something. It's really up to you. The more specifics you give it, the more you dig into your knowledge state, the more you can work with things. But I would say this is a pretty good start, maybe even a few lines shorter, a good place to start. So what happens here? Well, this is me coming up with what I think the answer is, and let's see what ChatGPT says about it. Your description is on the right track. That's good. So knowledge state is on the right track, but there are some inaccuracies and potential confusions the way you presented it. So now this is like, what a wonderful learning opportunity. I thought I knew something, but I didn't quite know it. And now, step by step, we are able to address these. And I'm not going to belabor this because everyone is learning something different. So this might not even really make sense to you. Or if you know a lot about machine learning, this might seem very obvious to you. But the fact is, I'm able to dig in here to each one of these examples, to follow up with it, to make sure that I understand my misconception or mistake. And that way, I have this ongoing dialogue with ChatGPT. And that's truly where the magic happens, because now you're not just passively taking in information from the web, whether it's a PDF or a lecture, but you're engaging in a dialogue, a back and forth where you're constantly refining your knowledge state, building off of that knowledge state. And that's what makes this so tremendous. To use an analogy then, ChatGPT is sort of like that, in this case, the machine learning professor, but they're infinitely patient. And if you don't have access to such a person, then this is wonderful because you can ask ChatGPT as many questions as you want about this, as many follow-ups, clarifying questions. You might even play it back at the end to make sure you really understand it. Use a new example because it said the example I gave wasn't quite correct to make sure that now my knowledge state is where I need it to be. And again, there's a lot to work off of here, but this is just the first step in a back and forth. And this is going to help me take a knowledge state of supervised machine learning and unsupervised machine learning that was on the right track, as it said, but wouldn't be something I would be comfortable graduating from this course and applying for a job in to say, like, I know the difference. But after this exercise, applying this technique with ChatGPT, I can feel at least more confident in this specific area. So let's recap what I did just now, because this is something that when you apply it, and if you apply it over time, is really going to help your knowledge state, your learning blossom. So the first thing I did was I made sure to be specific and give ChatGPT the context of what I was doing. When I was done with that, then I put in a thoughtful and specific response to the question itself. In this case, what was the difference between unsupervised and supervised learning? Obviously, everyone's going to have their own question, their own specific domain that they're studying. But whatever it is, you want to answer that question yourself, because that will give ChatGPT the opportunity, and again, the more specifics, the better, to unpack your knowledge state and see where those inconsistencies and omissions lie. And that is very powerful. The next step, though, is that follow-up dialogue. Don't just say, oh yeah, I was on the right track. ChatGPT told me where I went wrong. I've read it. I feel good now. Because that's false knowledge in the sense that it's easy to forget some of that. So instead, take some of what ChatGPT, take some of that feedback and play it back to ChatGPT. For instance, to make sure I understand this correctly, do you mean X, Y, Z? And then ask it that question. Or it might bring up something that you're still confused about. Oh, really? Why is it the case that my example didn't work? I thought that you can have these features, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever it is, this dialogue is really integral to refining your knowledge state and making it so that you walk away confident with what you've learned. And one other cool thing you can do is you can have ChatGPT create quizzes for you on this topic that you're trying to get better at. So after this long exchange or dialogue, say, hey, can you now create a quiz on what we covered? So you can actually take that, it will actually take that dialogue that you've had with it and create a quiz out of it. So maybe a week later, it'd be fun just to see how much you remember based on that exchange. And after that, if you feel confident, it's probably the learning that is probably in your long-term memory, and you're at a good place to move on to something else, which of course is very different when you're just constantly absorbing information, reading, thinking you understand something. It's almost like a house of cards that topples over. But with ChatGPT, you have a very strong learning foundation and you can get there very, very quickly.